Before we start, do me a favor. Tell me where you are watching from and how much time you have. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, the full hour. Drop your city or your county in the comments. I may have a sealed shaft with your place name stamped in the ledger. The seal on the mine door was perfect. A gray oval of soft lead crimped around an iron wire. 2 letters pressed into it with a die from the county office. Dry red wax smeared over the knot for good measure. The plank door itself was new pine, planed smooth. 3 cross braces, a forged strap hinge, a hasp that took a padlock the size of a child's fist. The padlock was government issue, brass body, steel shackle, numbered key. The inspector wrote the number in his notebook and then wrote the number again in the closure book of the district. June. 2 witnesses signed. 1 was the storekeeper, 1 was the pastor. The inspector pressed the lead seal with his die and said the formal words, "This working is closed and made safe." He put a chalk X on the door and signed the X with his initials. A year later, floodwater ate the road and the hillside slumped. The county sent a new man to check the old closures. He brushed dead vines off the same door. The chalk X was pale, but there. The padlock still showed the same number. The lead seal still carried the 2 letters. No pry marks around the hasp. No scratches around the lock. He called 2 locals as witnesses and cut the seal with his knife. He turned the key. When the door swung open, the first thing the lantern picked out was a hammer. It lay on the inside threshold with the handle pointing toward daylight. A seal that is whole and a hammer lying inside the door is a contradiction. If the door was shut from the outside, who put the hammer there after the seal was set? If the hammer was already there, why did the inspector not notice and move it when he set the door? The new man measured. The head was 2 pounds. The face was fresh steel, no mushrooming. The handle was hickory, new varnish. A thin smear of black dust where a hand had held it. He touched the dust and rubbed it between his fingers. It was fine. It had that faint metallic smell that never leaves your clothes once you have been underground. The air tasted wrong, stale, then sweet. 2 steps inside the drift, the men found a lantern sitting on a rail plate. It was a tin and glass miner's lamp, not a wall sconce, not a safety lamp with gauze. A plain wick lamp for a short job. The glass was gray with film, but on the inside of the chimney, a fresh ring of glossy soot circled the top. Glossy soot means the last burn was not long ago in mine time. Coal dust dulls a lamp fast. Gloss takes days to lose its shine, not years. There was still a thumbprint in the soot where someone had lifted the chimney to trim the wick. The wick itself was cut neat, not burned to a rag. The oil cup smelled of kerosene, not whale, not lard. Kerosene leaves a cold smell. Whale leaves a sweet one. The cup still carried a skin of fuel that had not fully evaporated. The inspector looked at the draft. The flame would have burned clean only if someone had opened a second airway. He backed out to the daylight and looked up the slope. On the skyline were 3 short posts, weather silver, that did not match the trees. They were cut square. They stood in a line that matched the strike of the drift below. The county book did not list a vent shaft on this claim. The seal record did not list a vent shaft either. But 3 posts and a scabby patch of stone stained black is a vent. In an old field, it is the only thing a vent looks like after a winter and a summer. He made a note. Possible old vent on ridge, unmapped. Go back to the door, look at the ironwork. The strap is old, the hasp is old, the screws are old, the padlock and the seal are new. That is the point. You can close a door you did not build. You can certify a thing you did not fully know. That is how a mine survives 3 owners and 1 debt and still keeps its tricks. The first owner cut the main drift. The second owner cut a side room and a laddered winze. The third owner took the last good coal and walked away when the price fell. The commission sealed the only hole that looked like a door, signed the paper, and went to the next hill. No one asked the oldest timberman about the vent that the first crew dug in a winter storm because the smoke would not lift. Inside, the floor told the same story. On the dry boards near the door, the dust was smooth and deep and old. 10 steps in, the dust was raked into faint arcs. Not footprints, not heel and toe. The kind of arcs a rope makes when you coil and throw. 2 bright spots showed on the rail. Not shine from hand oil. Shine from fresh metal dragging. A barrel wheel, maybe. Or a flat skid with a new iron shoe. The inspector traced the drag to a shallow scrape in the left wall. The scrape cut through old smoke and showed bright stone beneath. The mark was lower than a man's knee. A skid runs low when you pull from a vent above and behind. He logged the time, he logged the witnesses, then he wrote the one line that will carry you through the rest of this case. Seal intact at inspection. Evidence of interior disturbance after closure. That line is polite. It is also impossible. There are only 3 ways to disturb a sealed place from inside. 1. A man was already inside when the seal went on. 2. There was a second entrance. 3. The seal was opened and then resealed without marks. The hammer on the threshold says 1. The glossy soot and the ridge posts say 2. The perfect lead says 3 would require the county die and the key from the office drawer. The office drawer with the spare die and the spare key sat in a desk that had moved towns when the district line changed. The new clerk did not know the old clerk. The inventory sheet for the locksmith tools had 2 signatures. The second signature was a name that appears again in the store book for the week after the closure. That same week, the store sold a coil of new rope, 4 iron hooks, 2 lamp chimneys, 3 loaves of hard bread, and a tin of salt pork for cash. The buyer did not give a name. The clerk drew a small cross in the margin, which was the mark he used when a widow sent a boy to buy on her slate, but asked him to write it as cash. The inspector set the lantern back on the rail plate and listened. A mine always talks, even when it is dead. It pops, it ticks, it breathes from a hole you cannot see. The drift exhaled once, very slowly, and blew a curl of soot off the lamp glass. That was the breath of a shaft above, not the breath of a door behind him. He closed the door. He set a new lead seal. He wrote a new line. Further survey required. Ridge to be walked at dawn. Under the cloth-bound shift diary, September jitters. 3 consecutive nights. 4 names circled, absent. No tonnage tallies, no pay ticks. The company store ledger for those same nights charges those same 4 names for kerosene, wick, hard bread, and salt pork. You do not buy lamp oil when you are idle. You buy lamp oil when you plan to burn it underground. Count it. 4 pints total. 64 ounces. A wick lamp in still air drinks about 1 ounce per hour. That is 64 lamp hours. Divide by 4 men. 16 hours of light per man spread across those dates. Add the bread. 3 2-pound loaves plus a 6-pound tin of salt pork. 12 pounds of ration. At roughly 1.5 pounds per man per night, that feeds 4 men for 2 shifts. The clerk wrote cash, then penciled a tiny cross in the ledger margin, his quiet mark for do not chase the widow's slate. Purchases detached from payroll, purchases you hide. The wage drawer confirms the gap. 2 sealed pay envelopes remain unclaimed from the shutdown month. For the 4 absent names, there are no envelopes at all. Not even 0-tonnage envelopes a foreman leaves when he lets men go. Absence in the diary, silence in the wage drawer, oil and bread moving anyway. At the parish, the pastor notes 2 funerals for a flood upstream. No miners' service. In the school register, 2 boys who arrive with their fathers most mornings came late and alone. The teacher writes, "Father away on timber." Timber is the rural euphemism when you cannot write in the seam after hours. The signatures tell on themselves. On clean weeks, the foreman signs with a heavy F and a long cross stroke. On the absent nights, the F is thin and cramped, the cross stroke missing. The nib is finer. Lay the pages side by side with the store ledger. The same finer hand that tallied kerosene initialed those absences. The clerk hit a shift in the foreman's book. Check the blacksmith's issue sheet. After the official closure date appear 2 quiet lines, 1 wheel pin for a barrow, 1 coil of hemp line for vent work. Vent has been knifed into ricks, as if for hay ricks. No miner writes ricks. A miner writes rick stick when he props a wall. The scrape in the paper lifts fibers. A lie leaves splinters. Now the barrel. The cooper's stamp reads 30 gallons. The dipstick is notched at 5-gallon steps. The ledger shows a delivery 1 week before closure and none after. The stick should read near full. It reads near empty. 20 gallons do not vanish into thin air. They vanish into lamps. At the counter stands the slate, the chalkboard for families buying on credit. Under the latest figures, a ghost of 4 initials hangs beneath a smear. Tilt the slate to the window, and you can catch the curve of a C and the long leg of an L. The storekeeper wiped them, then carried the sales as cash in the book with a cross mark, 3 weeks in a row. Cover for men who could not be seen provisioning a sealed pit. Witness reports drift in at the edges. The rail yard nightman logs a single lantern bobbing along the creek at 2 a.m. on one of the absent dates. He writes trappers and goes back to his stool. In a mine, trappers are boys who tend doors. He did not know the word. He used the only one he had for a lamp that moves when the town sleeps. The safety ticket book tries to look official. Every entry that pulls men out has a cause: gas, fall, water. After closure, the book sits still. Then suddenly, a lone line appears without a ticket number. Door checked. All well, no cause, no signature. The watermark on that sheet does not match the rest of the book. Someone brought a loose page, wrote 2 safe words, and slid it in where a hurried glance would accept it. On the office bench, under a folded rain slicker, sits a small tin lunch pail. Inside, a chipped hard candy and 6 inches of hemp tied in a clean bowline. No fray, no grit. A bowline is not a knot you tie for decoration. It is a knot you tie when you mean to trust the rest of the coil. The invoices tell on the door. 3 days after the seal went on, the company store sold 120 feet of hemp rope, 4 forged grappling hooks, 2 lamp chimneys, and 2 tins of lamp oil marked kerosene. The entry is cash, no name. In the margin, the clerk drew the same small cross he uses when a widow sends a boy to pay later. The hooks are not shelf stock. They are special order from the river ironmonger. The clerk glued the supplier's stub into the ledger. 4 hook irons, 1/4 inch, eyes welded, points hardened. The delivery stamp shows they arrived the afternoon before the sale. Measure the rope from the coil end. Fresh hemp sheds golden fibers. Used line graze fast and flattens where it passes over rock. The coil on the counter left bright straw on the floor near the cutting block. The clerk's knife notch sits at 40 feet, at 80 feet, and at 120 feet. 3 cuts. The tail of the coil still shows a taped end, which means more was sold later. The receipt book shows no name and no account. Cash cleans a trail when a padlock cannot. Follow the hardware. The hooks came wrapped in brown paper stamped by the ironmonger 2 towns downriver. That shop takes barges every Tuesday. The barge manifest lists a small crate of farm implements hooks, consigned to the storekeeper by initials only. The crate wood is tulip poplar, not oak, and carries a faint smear of pine tar from a barge rail. Poplar crates splinter if you rush them. The storekeeper pried this one slow. The crate face lies behind the counter with 4 neat nail pulls and no tear out. Someone asked him to keep the paper, the crate face, and the iron free of visible scratches. Check the oil math. 2 1-gallon tins on the same invoice. A tin weighs 7 pounds full and 1 pound empty. The scale behind the counter reads 14 pounds when both sit upon it and 2 pounds after they are poured. 12 pounds gone into cans and lamps. At roughly 1 ounce per hour per lamp in still air, 2 gallons give 256 lamp hours. Split among 4 men, that is 64 hours of burn time. Enough for 4 night entries of 4 hours each, plus safety margin if the air is good. Enough for 1 deep pull if the air is not. Look for resin. Hemp sold for well work and, for hauling timber, gets dressed with pine tar. The rope cuts on the store floor show no black pitch line. The coils bought here were clean, which is what you choose if you intend to shoulder the line over bare skin or pull through your palms in the dark. Clean rope burns less. Tar leaves you sticky and loud against rock. The men who bought this meant to move quiet. Watch the knot vocabulary in the town. Teamsters favor the clove hitch and the half hitch. Rivermen favor the bowline, the figure 8, and the fisherman's bend. Miners who have ever been pressed into river season carry the bowline in their hands without thinking. In the blacksmith's scrap bin, the offcut from one hook eye shows a shallow groove filed across the inner curve. A groove like that holds a bowline eye from slipping under shock. The smith does not waste file time unless someone asked for that groove. Check the trail between store and hillside. On the footbridge over the creek there is a waxy smear on the lowest railing where a heavy coil rubbed in passing. It is not candle wax. It is linseed and varnish from a new rope dressing brushed on at the mill to keep hemp from mildewing in shipment. The smear catches dust and seed fluff. The smear is 3 feet long, which matches the lay of a coil on a shoulder as a man shifts it from side to side. On the far bank, a scuff marks the earth where metal kissed stone. A hook point leaves a crescent. 4 crescents sit in a row, spaced like fingers. Open the small book of petty cash that the clerk keeps under his till. The page for the same week shows change made for an out-of-town note, 1 $5 bill, then a subtraction that equals the price of rope and oil. An out-of-town bill means a stranger or a man, paid by someone who does not want local coin traced through church collections. The clerk folds the bill under his blotter and writes cash in the big ledger because cash is a closed door like a sealed mine, and a closed door answers fewer questions. Inventory, the hook marks. The ridge posts above the drift carry shallow bites at 3 heights, knee-high, waist-high, and shoulder-high. The knee bites match a man bracing while he pays out line. The waist bites match a quick catch when a load swings. The shoulder bites match a last haul before a rest. On the rock lip beside the posts, a thin gray stripe shows where a line dragged grit in a straight, repeated path. The stripe runs from the posts to a shallow depression where feet have shuffled and ground shale to flour. The depression points straight to the unlisted vent. Run the numbers for lift and drop. 120 feet of rope halves to 60 feet when doubled, thirds to 40 feet when tripled, with a simple block, and still gives enough tail for a man to hold on a post. A 4-hook set means anchors on 2 points at the rim, a traveler hook for the load, and a spare for panic. 4 men can lift 150 pounds from a winds by hand with a fair lead. 4 men can lower one of their own into a bad place and bring him up without a block if the walls are narrow and the handler is steady. The tally of hooks and the cut marks on the coil say, this was not guesswork. Someone calculated before they bought. Now lay the 2 documents side by side, the seal certificate dated in June and the rope invoice dated 3 days later. The county keeps the die for the seal in a drawer in a desk in a room with 1 key. The desk moved when the line of the district moved and the old clerk retired. The rope and the hooks and the oil do not care where a desk sits. They care about the fact that a door with a fresh lead badge is only 1 door on a hill that breathes in 2 places. The clerk tore the receipt for the rope from his book and pressed it flat with a glass paperweight. Under the glass, a single hemp fiber lay caught in the wet ink. It dried there, glossy and golden, fixed in the clerk's neat hand. That one thread ties the store to the ridge, and the ridge to the lamp with glossy soot. It is enough to back a warrant for a walk up the hill at dawn. Walk the ridge. 3 posts weathered gray stand, where no fence ever ran. Each post is squared by hand, not split, and each carries 2 iron nail holes on the windward face. Between the second and the third post, the ground flattens into an oval pad of bare soil, 3 strides by 2, with shale crushed to powder underfoot. 10 paces downslope, a shallow sink, circular, 6 feet across, has a collar of broken rock and stump ends. The county map does not list a vent here. The company plan does not list a vent here. The land deed before the company purchase mentions an old prospect shaft on the knoll, then crosses it out. The surveyor's bearing line on that deed is 4 degrees off the bearing in the company plan. A 4-degree error is enough to walk past a hole by 30 yards in fog. Test the air. Hold a strip of gauze above the sink. It pulls inward and holds against the draw. Strike a match and cup it. The flame leans, not to the breeze from the valley, but to the circle of broken stone. A mine that pulls on a still morning has a second mouth. Set a candle stub on the rim. In 1 minute, the flame gutters and tips toward the center, then recovers when you lift it away. That is a weak, steady draft. That is not a gust. Search the collar. On the east side, 1 timber shows 2 saw kerfs that do not match the pit saw used for the original crib. The teeth marks are finer from a later saw. In the notch of that same timber, pine sap has bled and varnished. Fresh sap on weatherwood means a cut end was exposed this summer and turned inward. Under the timber lies a shard of lantern chimney glass. The edge is clean, no frost spall. It broke after the last hard freeze. Probe the void. Lower a stone on a line and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds to the first strike, then a smaller fall, 40 to 50 feet to a platform, then another 15 feet to the drift. Pull the line back. The last 2 feet are blacked with fine dust and dotted with tiny silver flakes. Rub those flakes. They are galena specks, not river sand. The smell on the line is cold and metallic, the same smell that rose from the door. Find the ladder that is not in any book. The north edge of the sink reveals the top rung buried under fall leaves. It is a rail section cut in half and spiked into the crib as a step. The spikes are machine heads, not hand-forged, and the heads carry a maker's mark from the new mill, not the old iron. The last 3 rungs are clean where boots scrape the rust. 1 rung bears a faint smear that catches the light. It is black, not brown. Rub it on a white scrap. The smear grayens the cloth and leaves a dull sheen. That is boot polish, not earth, not oil. Look for soot where soot has no business. On the inner face of the crib, 6 inches below the rim, a crescent of black curls under a splinter. It arcs like the top of a lantern flame. Someone lifted a lamp to look down and touched the chimney to wood. The soot has gloss like the gloss on the lamp in the drift. Gloss dies in weeks. The gloss remains. Check for tool chatter. The inner stones carry narrow parallel scratches that align with a straight drop. A rope under tension drags grit in a single line. A rope that pays and hauls leaves a pair. Here the pair starts at the posts, crosses the rock rim, and vanishes over the lip. The right line is deeper, which means the handler favored his right hand. On the rim, a shallow groove runs outward to the post pad. That groove is full of fresh hemp fuzz. Verify the silence in the papers. The closure certificate lists the main door, the lock number, the witness names. It contains no field for auxiliary openings, and the inspector's template does not ask. The company's last quarterly map bears a tiny circle near the ridge with an erased letter beside it. Under a bleak light, the The letter looks like a V or a W depending on angle. The clerk who inked the quarterly plan used a different blue than the draftsman who drew the year plan. One circle did not travel from one sheet to the other when the owner changed. Read the hill as a machine. Warm valley air rises in the afternoon and feeds the ridge mouth. At night, cold air drops through the mouth and pushes along the drift toward the sealed door. A night crew can ride that drop for 4 hours with clean lamps before the air goes sour. A morning crew dies on the same rope when the sun turns and the draft reverses. The lamp with glossy soot in the drift says the crew rode the right side of the cycle. Put your palm to the crib. The wood is cool and damp. Between the timbers, a strip of cloth has been jammed as a wedge. It is torn from a flour sack. 2 printed letters remain in blue. F and L flour sacks in the store last month were stamped Flour Family. The spacing of the letters on the wedge matches the spacing on that sack. The wedge smells faintly of bacon. Salt pork packed with flour rub leaves a smell that lingers when sweat warms it. Step back and draw the geometry. 3 posts, an oval pad, a sink, a crib with modern spikes, a ladder of cut rail, a double rope groove, a soot crescent under the rim, gauze that pulls inward in still air, a polished smear on a rung. None of this is in the county book. None of this is in the company plan. All of this faces the line of the drift beneath, which the inspector sealed with lead and brass and chalk. The ridge is the second door, and it has been used. At the base of the nearest post, pressed into the flour-fine shale, lies a short wooden match with the head rubbed off and the stick blackened halfway. The burn stops sharp, not in a crumble. Someone pinched it out with wet fingers. The damp print left on the wood has lifted dirt in a whirl. The ridge keeps the whirl. The whirl does not match the foreman's card in the office file. Begin with the coroner's sheet that pretends to be ordinary. Accident in shed. Male, adult, no name. Found at dawn behind a wagon work shed with a crushed hand and a split scalp. Tools on the ground, a sledge, and a pry bar. Then the line that does not fit a shed. Black particulate in hair and under nails. Metallic odor present. The shed roof is cedar and dusts pale. Mine dust dusts dark and tastes like coin on the tongue. The coroner used particulate because he did not want to write coal. He swabbed the fingernails and pressed the swab in his book. Under a lens it shows bright, square little mirrors, galena crystals. The wagon lot does not make galena. One pocket held a match tin, 2 lamp wicks, and a folded paper from the store with 4 numbers and no names. The numbers sum the exact invoice for 120 feet of rope, 4 hooks, and 2 lamp chimneys. The clerk's tiny cross mark sits in the corner. In the other pocket were 2 peppermints and a small leather purse with a widow's copper token. The token is how the store lets a woman send a boy to fetch groceries on slate. If she gave her token to a man, it means he bought for a house that could not be seen buying. List the likely hands. Debt lists in the clerk's drawer show 3 men more than $30 behind after the spring flood. A 4th is a timberman with no work since the railroad shifted the spur. In the blacksmith's cash book, one name paid for a wheel pin in coin the day after the closure, odd because pay stopped and coin ran short. In the church poor fund ledger, 3 envelopes appear without names, each with the same cramped hand that wrote "absent" in the shift diary. The envelopes tally to exactly the cost of a coffin and a simple stone. Cash that arrives cheap and fast after a seal goes on is cash from unrecorded labor. Trace the motive line by line. A sealed drift leaves a rib of good ore at the face. Owners call it a pillar. A family calls it a winter's worth of bread. A brother calls it the only way to lift a body when the company will not pay for a recovery. The widow's slate grew thicker in the weeks after the closure. Salt pork, flour, nurse liniment. On one day there is a charge for a pair of children's shoes. That same day the rope smear appeared on the bridge rail. People buy shoes when they expect a walk after a funeral. Follow the night routine built from scraps. 2 men go ahead to open the vent cover and test draft. 1 man stays at the ridge posts to handle line. 1 man carries the tools down the door side to stage them inside the threshold so the crew wastes no fuel shuttling. The bowline knot in the lunch pail shows who tied line at the top. The glossy soot in the drift shows when the lamps burned clean. The slick drag on the rail plate shows a barrow or a sled, not feet. The scrape low on the wall shows a load flat to the floor. A body rides flatter than sacks do. A schoolboy tells the piece no one asked him for because adults do not ask boys unless someone dies. He says he woke and heard the pasture gate chains at a strange hour, like coins poured slow. He says the men came back toward the dawn on the creek bank path, one singing very soft to make the dogs think it was morning. He says a coat that went out did not come back. The coat was the heavy one with the tar patch on the shoulder. There is tar on the ladder, rung in the vent. There is tar on the shoulder line in the rope groove. The ledger of the undertaker speaks cold. Box pine. No dressing. 2 men to carry no name, paid by church ladies. The coroner's book lists a burial without an inquest. A box that moves from a back door to a wagon without a name is a box that stopped being evidence on a hill and started being love under a quilt in a kitchen. The next Sunday, the pastor's notes show a sermon on those who labor in the dark and an appeal for the poor fund. On Monday, the store ledger shows a purchase of lime. Families spread lime where they mean to keep a thing from smelling like what it is. Consider the warehouse hand line from the town paper. It appears once the week after the closure. Injury to a warehouse hand late at night. No names. Warehouses in this town do not run lamps past sundown. The word is a blanket a clerk throws over a miner when a mine is not allowed to exist after hours. It appears again 3 weeks later beside glancing blow to the shoulder at the mill. The mill does not smell of kerosene. The mill does not leave a polished smear on a rail step. Return to the rope math because rope does not lie. 3 cuts. 40 feet, 80 feet, 120 feet. The vent drop is 50 feet to a platform and 15 more to the drift. 40 feet lowers a man to the platform with 4 feet to spare for a knot and a bite. 80 feet reaches the drift with slack for a wrap around a post. 120 feet doubles a load on a simple hand haul with 2 men braced and 2 men paying. A body and a barrow pan weigh together near 160 pounds. 4 men with 2 posts and a clean bowline can make that come up. A hand crushed on a bar at dawn is the price paid when a line kicks and a man refuses to let it go. Make the faces from the tiny things the paper keeps when names are dangerous. The man with peppermint in his pocket is the one who gave a sweet to the boy at the pasture fence. The man with the widow's token is the one who swore to fetch her husband if the company would not. The man with the new wheel pin is the one who borrowed the barrow without asking because asking leaves a note. The man with the trimmed wick is the one who still believes in saving oil when the dark wants everything you brought. The last man is the one on the coroner's sheet under accident in shed, because mine would force a sheriff, and a sheriff would force a question the ridge could not answer without tearing up the crib and the post pad and the cut rope, and the hill cannot afford another set of eyes before the sun turns and the draft reverses. Start with the numbers that will not sit still. The county weekly prints 11 dead in the June disaster. The church burial book records 9 services in the fortnight after, all marked accident. The coroner's ledger lists 10 bodies examined, 1 tagged unknown male, no inquest, then a blank line, 3 sources, 3 totals, 1 hill. Count the bells. The sexton's notebook has a habit the pastor does not. He writes how many times he rang the bell and at what hour. On 2 mornings, the bell tolled 9 strokes, and then, 2 hours later, tolled twice more without a service. 9 plus 2 is 11. On the undertaker's job slips, those same dates show 2 men to carry for 9 coffins, and on the margin of 1 day, he penciled loaned hearse, evening run. The extra run is not in the church book. It ends at the back gate of the graveyard, not the front. Walk the rows and measure the ground. The cemetery lot map shows 24 family plots and 2 potter's rows for the poor. In the poor row, 3 fresh mounds lie without stones, each at 4 feet of earth instead of the full depth. The gravedigger's timesheet shows he dug 9 deep graves and assisted with 2 light. Light means a box that does not weigh like a man. Light means a box that carries bone that has already been picked by time or burned by lime. The store ledger that week sells 3 sacks of lime to 3 different names that do not usually buy building supplies. Lime goes to 2 places in a summer, to whitewash a coop or to stop a smell. Pull the receipts for stone. The Mason's order book lists 3 headstones for named families and 1 field set stone for unknown. Field set stones are blanks planted to mark a space until a name can be afforded or proved. The blank stands in the poor row over one of the light mounds. The church book has no entry for that burial. The coroner's line that reads, "Unknown male, no inquest," sits 4 days before the Mason delivered the blank. A body moved faster than the paperwork dared. Check the poor fund disbursements. The church ladies wrote 9 vouchers to widows for food and coal chits. 2 smaller vouchers paid the gravedigger under sundries. The sums add to the price of 2 simple interments without service. The distribution list for the county relief subscription names 10 households affected by the mine closure. 1 more envelope sits in the clerk's drawer with no name, and a sum that matches a coffin, a box of lime, and a wagon to the back gate in the dark. Search the census roll for that summer. A household of 5 becomes 4 when a father disappears. A household of 6 becomes 5. In 3 homes adjacent to the mine lane, boys listed as school vanish from the roll in the following year and reappear as farm laborer on a cousin's acreage 2 townships over. Families that bury without names also ship out children without questions until the talk dies. The school register for the same term shows 2 girls withdrawn to Aunt in County East. The Aunt's parish book has no baptisms for those girls. The word aunt becomes a broom. Open the doctor's day book. In the week of the bell tolls, he charges for 9 visits, death confirmation, and writes 2 more lines for exposure at dawn. Exposure at dawn means men carrying a load from a cold place to a colder place. On one of those lines, he notes, fingers frost-nipped in summer. A rope burns a palm, a night shaft burns fingers white. He bandaged and kept his mouth shut because the coroner had already written, accident in shed. Look back at the newspaper. The first mention after the flood says, 11 dead in the June disaster. The retraction column 2 weeks later mutters, earlier reports overstated fatalities, and the total becomes 9. It does not say which 2 were subtracted. It does not say whether 2 men rose from graves to walk. It does not say whether 2 men lost their names and were counted as nobody. Check the freight yard scale book. The night of the extra hearse run shows 1 entry for wagon, empty out, and wagon same, light load, in 1 hour later. The guard wrote lumber because that is what a pine box looks like under a tarp. The scale numbers show 230 pounds on the way in. A pine coffin of the cheap sort weighs about 70 pounds. Subtract. 160 pounds is a man who has not eaten well since the closure. Count the candles on the altar. For 9 named services, the pastor orders altar tapers in 2 bundles and leaves a printed notice in the vestry for bell ringers. For 2 evenings he orders no tapers and leaves no notice. On those nights the sexton's book shows a key taken to the back gate and returned with a smear of clay on the brass. The smear matches the clay that cakes the wagon rut by the poor row when a wheelsman cuts the corner to avoid the main path. Go back to the coroner's ledger for the 10th body. The entry has a date, a time, and the words, "No inquest." No inquest means no jury. No jury means no public talk. At the bottom edge of the page, a faint pencil line connects that entry to a note in the margin. See Sheriff File. The sheriff's file is slim. It holds a single statement from a witness who found a man behind a shed. The witness writes that he saw coal dust on his hair, then scratches out coal and writes black. The witness signs with a mark. The sheriff never forwarded the file to a grand jury. The 11th exists only in the bell count and in the habit of a dry hand who marks his rope at 40 feet, at 80 feet, at 120 feet. 9 men came back to daylight with names. 1 came back as unknown male. 1 came back as weight, and a smear of clay, and the number of tolls in a sexton's neat little book. The paper dropped 2 from the headline, but the ridge did not. The ridge still pulls. The ridge does not forget. Lay the official report on the table. Explosion of fire damp during closure activities. No personnel present. Seal remained intact. 3 sentences, 3 claims. Test each against the paper and the ground. Claim 1. Fire damp during closure. Fire damp is gas. Gas needs an ignition. The closure log for the month shows no issue of blasting powder, no issue of squibs, no issue of safety fuses, and no fresh cannel for testing lamps. The blacksmith's book shows no striker flints issued, and no repairs to gauze on safety lamps. The door frame carries no scorch bloom, only old smoke from years before. Inside the drift, the glossy ring on the lamp chimney says a clean burn in a moving draft, not an explosive burn that soots everything in one pulse. If gas detonated, the soot ring would be matte and everywhere, and the lamp glass would be shattered into sand. It is whole. Claim 2. During closure activities, the inspector who set the seal recorded the lock number, the witness names, the time of day, and the chalk X. He did not record a final lamp test inside the drift. He did not enter a safety ticket for gas present. The safety ticket book after closure sits quiet, then acquires one line on a different watermark that reads, "Door checked." All well, no number, no signature. A real closure activity leaves a ticket and a number because numbers trigger pay and insurance. A line without a number is a line written to be seen in passing, not a line written to pay a crew. Claim 3. No personnel present. Shift diary marks 4 men absent on nights when the store ledger sells lamp oil and bread to the same names. Wages drawer holds no final envelopes for those men. Blacksmith issues a wheel pin and a coil of line for vent work with the word vent knifed into ricks. The ridge posts carry fresh rope scars at 3 heights. The vent crib shows modern spikes and a soot crescent under the rim. A matchstick with a pinched-out head sits in the shale. The draft at the sink pulls a candle. No personnel present fails at the first rope fiber glued under the clerk's receipt ink. Now compute timing, because timing is the one honest witness. Kerosene consumption at 1 ounce per hour per lamp gives 64 lamp hours purchased in the first ledger group and 256 in the second. A night crew that enters at midnight and exits before the rooster uses 4 to 5 hours per night per lamp. 3 to 4 nights are supported by the first invoice, 1 or 2 deeper nights by the second. The glossy soot inside the drift chimney holds gloss for days, not months. The lamp was fired within days of inspection, not in a forgotten past. An inspector who opens a door onto a fresh lamp and a clean rope drag cannot truthfully write "no personnel present." Check pressure signs. A true explosion in a confined drift lifts dust and flakes paint in blisters on iron. The padlock shows no blistering. The hasp shows no bloom. The interior threshold boards carry undisturbed dust, except for the arc where the hammer lay. The hammer face is unmushroomed and carries only skin oil and fine dust, no pitting from flying grit. The door itself shows no racking of hinges. An event that breaks ribs breaks hardware. The only thing broken is the story. Check moisture because the official report leans on the phrase, closing in damp conditions. The inspector's log for that week records 0 drip at door lintel. Damp at 40 yards. 0 drip at the lintel means stable conditions near the seal. Damp at 40 yards means a slow breath, not a flooded collapse. The lamp in the drift could burn clean because draft moved past it from the vent to the door. Fire damp in such a draft pools in pockets, not at the threshold. If someone had lit gas near the door, the flame would have run back along the roof, scorched the lintel, and licked the wax smear on the seal. The wax smear is intact. Test the arithmetic of force. The company claims a minor outgassing dislodged timbers and made the place unsafe, justifying the closure extension. A minor outgassing does not toss a barrow, yet the rail plate inside the threshold bears a polished stripe, like a skid was pulled across it after closure. The left wall carries a fresh scar at knee height, consistent with a low-load scraping. Outgassing does not move skids after seal set. Men do. Follow the money because money is the ghost that fingerprints everything. Insurance premiums drop when a closure is declared complete without incident. The owner's letter to the county clerk requests expedited certification 3 days after the seal. On that same day, the store receives and sells rope, hooks, and oil for cash. The owner gains a certificate that lowers his costs. The men gain a kit that beats a certificate. The coroner gains an accident in shed that costs no inquest. Each line favors someone. None favors the truth printed in the weekly that says 11 dead. Lay the inconsistencies side by side as a table in your head. No blasting issues, no ticket, intact soot ring, no scorch on hardware, no hinge rack, glossy chimney, new rope scars on ridge post, hemp fuzz in groove, vent ladder rungs polished, cash purchases in the ledger timed to the seal, clerk's cross marks, out-of-town note, safety line on mismatched paper, missing signature, wrong watermark, sexton's bell count at 11, undertaker's evening run, 2 light mounds in Potter's Row, a report that calls an event fire damp during closure, while every physical sign points to human activity after closure through an unmapped vent, is not a report. It is a shield. The lead seal was perfect because it guarded the wrong hole. The wrong hole let men go in and out until one did not come back by the door the county recognized. The last page of the report cites community rumor and warns against unauthorized entry by curiosity seekers. The same day, the school register marks 2 boys withdrawn to Ant in County East. The store sells a sack of lime. The church poor fund writes 2 sundry vouchers to the gravedigger. The hill pulls air through the sink with the same slow breath it had the day the chalk X went on the door. A seal is a statement. A draft is a fact. One of them is lying. 3 explanations remain. Test each against what the paper and the rock already told us, then leave a list precise enough that someone in your county can check it tomorrow. Version A. Theft after closure through the unmapped vent. Evidence that holds. Glossy soot ring on the lamp chimney in the drift. Rope grooves cut fresh across the vent rim. Hemp fuzz in the ridge groove. Bowline practice knot in the lunch pail. Blacksmith entry for coil line. Vent work knifed into ricks. Store invoices for rope, hooks, kerosene 3 days after the seal. Padlock and lead badge unmarked. Drag stripe across the rail plate. Knee-high wall scrape from a low skid. Clerk's cash with the tiny cross mark. Out-of-town bill changed under the till. What breaks it? Nothing in the physical trail. The only weak link is motive, which the debt lists, widow's slate, and lime purchases more than cover. Version B, clandestine recovery and reburial. Evidence that holds: undertaker's slip box pine, no dressing, 2 men to carry, paid by church ladies. Sexton's bell totals at 11 when the church book lists 9 services. 2 light mounds in the Potter's Row, store sales of lime to households that never buy building supplies. Freight yard scale log for a light load at night. Coroner's unknown male, no inquest. Newspaper retraction shaving the fatality count without naming who was removed. Tar smear on a ladder, rung that matches a tar patch on a missing coat. School withdrawals that erase boys, the weak talk peaks. What breaks it? Nothing documentary if a community closes ranks. The silence in the parish book where a name should stand is the point. Version C, staged accident on paper to protect the owner and the premium. Evidence that holds: 0 issues of powder, squibs, or fuses in the closure week. Safety ticket line on wrong watermark and without a number. Inspector's log: 0 drip at lintel, which contradicts a damp gas story. Unblistered padlock and hasp. Intact wax smear on the lead seal. Owner's letter for expedited certification 3 days before the rope and oil sales. The phrase, "no personnel present," defeated by every cut fiber glued under the receipt ink. What breaks it? The county would need access to the seal die and a spare key to fake and open and reseal. That trail runs through the desk that moved with the district line. Now turn this into a field kit for anyone whose town kept even half its paper. Company store ledger versus shift diary. Flag absent nights that pair with purchases of lamp oil, wick, bread, bacon. Note cash lines with a small clerk's cross or other margin mark. Blacksmith issue sheet. Look for vent, rick, line, pin, and any knifed edits. Lift the page to catch paper fibers raised by a blade. Padlock and seal record. Copy the lock number, die letters, and witness names. Compared to the closure log and safety ticket numbers, mismatched watermarks are a red flag. Wedge walk, 3 posts, an oval pad, a sink with a crib, soot crescent under the rim, rope grooves from crib to post, gauze strip drift test at dawn, candle flame, lean. Coroner's ledger versus undertaker's slips. Count bodies examined, no inquest lines, unknown male, 2 men to carry, and any evening runs. Sexton's bell book versus church register. Total strokes per day against recorded services. Backgate key checkouts, clay on brass afterward. Poor fund and relief subscriptions, totals that match a coffin, lime, and a wagon to the back gate. Anonymous envelopes in the clerk's drawer. Freight yard and scale house, wagon light load entries at odd hours, guards labeling tarped pine as lumber. Census and school rolls, disappearances of fathers followed by boys reappearing as farm laborer, with cousins 2 townships away, to aunt in County East, with no matching baptisms in that aunt's parish. Maps. Quarterly company plan versus annual plan versus deed survey, erased circles, off by 4 degrees bearings that shift event off the page. If your county has even 3 of these threads, pull them, and the ridge will answer. A sealed door is a statement. A breathing vent is a fact. The glossy soot on a lamp that should be cold is a fact. Rope math is a fact. Bell counts are a fact. When facts align, the report either bends or breaks. If you can check one book this week, make it the store ledger for the closure month. Photograph the page where rope and oil appear after a seal, and look for the clerk's private mark. If you can walk one place, make it the ridge at dawn. Hold gauze over the sink. If it pulls, the hill still remembers. If this kind of case matters where you live, help me map the next hill. Comment with your county and which source you can reach first: store ledger, coroner's book, or cemetery map. Subscribe so you do not miss the follow-up. a mine with a perfect county seal, and inside, a door bolted from within.